Have an update on the billions of dollars being taken.
Scammers, as we know, are becoming more and more sophisticated.
Lying in bed, wondering how I could tell my wife that we'd lost everything.
Our mission is to protect consumers worldwide from scams. Cybercrime is going through the roof, and we need to take action fast.
We cannot keep on working in silos, and we've heard it here a couple of times already today. I think GASA is bringing this cross-sector perspective that is so much lacking in most of the events.
I'm hoping to start finding ways to help take the information I have and really help people.
These type of events are finally going to hear we took action instead of we need to take action and make the world a little bit better.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Nils Mueller, and welcome to our webinar today. I am the chapter manager of the North America chapter for the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. It's my tremendous pleasure to be here today. And we are doing the Anatomy of a Scam, Tech Support Scams. And without further ado, let me turn it over to my colleague and the expert for the day and your host, Ayelet Biger-Levin. Please, Ayelet, take it away.
Thank you, Niels. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ayelet Biger-Levin, Director at the North America chapter of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. And thank you. And today we're going to talk about outsmarting the imposters, a deep dive into tech support scams. So our mission is to bring industry, government, and nonprofits together to fight scams through collaboration, awareness, and innovation. I'm excited to be here today to share insights and explore solutions that protect consumers from evolving threats. Beyond that, at the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, we focus on intelligence sharing, networking, research, and the global signal exchange as a means to share data across industry and across government, private, and public sectors. Before we dive in, I wanted to share that we're excited to announce the opening of the registration of the America Summit for Global Anti-Scam Alliance that is happening December 3rd and 4th in Washington, D.C. You can sign up, and if you want to reach out to partner, you can reach out to partner@gasa.org. And so what are we going to focus on today? So scammers are getting more and more sophisticated, especially with tech support scams. These show up as fake pop-ups, spoofed calls, or ads urging people to call for help, only to trick them into paying for fake services or giving up control of their device. So to truly protect people, we need to go deeper than broad prevention tips or scam controls. That's why today we're breaking down the scam step by step so we can build strategies that stop them at the source. We have an incredible panel of speakers today, and they're going to introduce themselves in just a bit. But what we wanted to do is really bring experts from across the industry so they can share their perspective from the anatomy of the scam all the way to controls and what we can do about it. Before we dive in, I wanted to remind everyone that we're using Chatham House rules, which means that you can use the information you receive, but not speakers or quotes. And this session is going to be recorded. So keep that in mind. And then I'm ready to dive right in. So we'll have 2 parts of the session. We can take off the slides for now and start inviting Ken, Sarah, and Kitboga to the conversation. So Ken, let's start with you. Ken. First, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to start actually by something else before we dive right in. And I wanted to ask the speakers to introduce themselves very quickly. So sorry, not Ken, we'll start with you, Antoine. If you can give us a quick intro of yourself, and then we'll go to everyone. Thank you.
Of course. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Antoine Dimitrov. I've been with the company for more than 5 or 6 years at this point. I'm part of the security and trust and safety teams. And luckily, I've been also part of the majority of fraud prevention and anti-scam initiatives that we've done as a company. And I will be more than happy to share, of course, some of the knowledge and some of the measures that we've implemented. So very happy to be here and looking forward to this.
Thank you. Ken.
I'm Ken
To you.
Westbrook. I'm the founder and CEO of Stop Scams Alliance. We are consumer focused and we focus on trying to stop scams as far upstream as possible before they even hit the consumer or the bank.
Thank you. Sarah, to you.
Sarah Ralston. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Proxyware and the Director of Privacy and Risk Solutions at the Media Trust. I'm very focused on digital citizen protection, especially for vulnerable populations like seniors and children.
Thank you. Kitboga.
Hey, yeah, I'm Kit. I'm a scam baiter YouTuber. I essentially talk to scammers all day. I'm also the CEO of Seraph Secure, a threat intelligence and consumer software company to protect people from scams.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Leyla.
Hi, I'm Leyla. I am heading the scam research at Gen, a company with family of trusted consumer brands like Norton, Avast, and LifeLock. And our main focus is to empower the digital freedom of people in the world in this upcoming very challenging periods we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you. So now we'll get to the first part of our session, which is understanding the scam lifecycle. So Ken, I wanted to start with you. Can you share how you got into this, your mother's story? Maybe we can wait with the slides for just a second. If you can share your story and how you became an advocate for combating scams.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting all of us here today. This is a very important topic. To explain the story about my mom, let me explain by backing up a few years. Tech support scams started about 10 years ago. They started off in the early days trying to trick people into sending $500 to what they thought was Microsoft for support they didn't need. But around 2023, the FBI announced that the scammers had created a much more sophisticated, wicked, and devastating variant of the tech support scam, and they dubbed it the Phantom Hacker. And it's this Phantom Hacker variant that was targeted at my mom. It was Valentine's Day in 2023, and my mom did a Google search because her sister had recently died and she wanted to look up her obituary. So she was looking for an obituary website. And when she clicked on the search result, a pop-up took over her computer and a voice shouted, "Do not turn off your computer. Do not turn off your computer." So she felt she had no choice. She called the 1-800 number there that was presented thinking she was calling Microsoft support, but she was really in the hands then of cyber criminals, probably located in India. But the scammer didn't say he was from India, of course. He said his name was Noah Blake. He said he was from Microsoft and he was here to help. Mom said that the caller ID on her phone said Washington State when she was talking to Noah, so she trusted him. After all, he was from a trusted American company. Noah said, "I have some bad news for you, ma'am. We see 39 hackers on your computer right now. And very often when your computer gets hacked, the hackers hack into your bank accounts too. So let's put you in touch with your bank." Noah asked for her phone number. And the next thing he said was, "Well, we see you have 2 accounts at Chase Bank, Mrs. Westbrook. Let's put you in touch with the Chase Bank fraud department." Now just think about that. She did not give him her name. All she did was provided a phone number, and then he was able to look up where she banked and the number of accounts. So she was, of course, wowed by this. You know, who else could look that up unless you were very official? So Mom believes that she was working with Microsoft and bank authorities to prevent her money from being stolen by hackers. And by the way, when she thought she was talking to Chase Bank, which was really probably the guy in the cubicle next door to the Microsoft guy, her caller ID was spoofed to say Connecticut. So she was then instructed not to tell anyone because this is an official matter, and if she spoke to anybody about it, the hackers would succeed in taking all of her money. So they were able to isolate her psychologically at that point. They then told her how to buy gift cards to start transferring money to a supposedly protected account. Later, they asked for cashier's checks in increasing amounts until they stole most of her life savings. Mom swore that she never installed software at the criminal's request, but afterwards, my brother and I found UltraViewer and GoToAssist on her computer, which is remote access software. Now, my mom was intelligent. She read AARP reports about scams. She knew the red flags, But look at the psychological ingredients of this thing, which is why the scammers are able to overcome that. Number one, her computer is taken over by people she believes are authorities from Microsoft and Chase. They had to be authorities. Who else could know where she banked without her even telling them about it? Number two, who else would know her name without her telling them? Number three, caller ID showed their location as appropriate, either Washington State or Connecticut. And number four, who else but authorities could control her computer? The tech support scammers used remote access software to control her computer. She was allowed to only use it a few minutes a day, and at other times the criminals were blocking access to it. So this was also a part of the psychology of it. My mom lived in a state of fear for weeks while the thieves slowly drained her account. Afterwards, she lived in a state of shame, despite the family's attempts to reassure her that she had been robbed by sophisticated cyber criminals. A year after the theft, 2 FBI agents knocked on her door and asked her to retell the story because they were pursuing a case. And while that was very welcome news, of course, that evening she had the first of several heart attacks and strokes that would take her life within a few months. There's no doubt that the stress from that crime caused a downward health spiral that contributed to her death.
So first of all, I'm very sorry to hear the whole story, and especially the emotional, physical, and I'm sorry for your loss. And you turned this ordeal into advocacy, into action, and so that for that I really admire, how you took this energy. So you became an advocate for combating scams with Stop Scams Alliance, and I wanted to ask you, what have you learned about the size and impact of the problem nationally, and what to do about it? So I think we'll pull up a few slides to help you here.
Yeah, the first slide, I'm an analyst, and so I wanted to really understand this thing and the component parts of it. I thought I would just share it with you all because I think it helps illustrate the steps that are often involved in this. This may not be true in every single case, but I think generically it's true. I'm showing it here as a cybersecurity kill chain kind of a thing. And look at all the opportunities that we have to stop this crime. First of all, it's altogether too easy at number one for a pop-up ad to be delivered via a malicious ad, and then that delivers the malware payload. Number two is the confidence building stage where a thief establishes trust and credibility by claiming to be Microsoft or Chase Bank. And they do this with spoofing the phone calls to make it look like they're really calling from the locations that correspond to their company. Number three, it's too easy for remote access software to be installed and then remain on a person's computer forever without the victim even knowing about it. Also, I would note that education could help people avoid the tech support scam, but I've looked at this, and education in the US is pretty inconsistent and mostly ineffective, I would say. I would point out that the FBI's advice is different than the FTC's advice, and neither agency tells users to turn off their computer or close the browser if they receive a tech support pop-up, which I think would be rather effective if they were just told to do that one thing. Moving to the nation as a whole, I have a couple of slides here to show some of the FBI data. I'm showing here losses reported to the FBI. And as you can see, tech support scam is not a little thing. It's the number 3 scam that's tracked by the FBI in terms of dollars lost. Tech support scams are, everybody thinks that identity theft is huge, and it is, but tech support scams is 8 times larger when it comes to losses, and it's over 100 times the losses reported from ransomware attacks, which gets a lot of attention from our government. Number 3, the next slide. Worse yet, when you look at the vectors here, it's not a pretty picture. It looks like a rocket ship going up, up, up. Reported losses have zoomed 200-fold in the last 9 years. Between 2023 and 2024 alone, the FBI reported a 60% increase in losses reported to them. That's from the victim side. Now, on the right-hand side, I'm showing you technical measures that Microsoft does. They look at activity in the Microsoft Edge browser, and they now say that 90% of malicious traffic on the Edge browser is attributed to tech scam activities. Their report from last year talked about the dire state of tech scams. They said that they're 10 times more costly than phishing scams. And they also say that most tech scams are originating from malicious advertising platforms. So I would just conclude by saying, the other thing that I've looked into is this more prevalent in the US or in other countries? And it turns out that this particular scam affects U.S. Consumers much more than those in other nations. Meanwhile, the U.S. has the best technology in the world, and there's just no doubt in my mind that if the technology companies would come together, we could defeat this technically. This is a technical attack that can be defeated technically. We have the technology, we just need the will to concentrate on it.
Thank you. And we'll talk about more of that in just a second when we get to the action. But I wanted to dive, thank you, Ken, a little more into the tactics, maybe double click into some things that you said here as well. So I wanted to turn it to you, Sarah, and you might want to mute yourself now. So Sarah, what are common means that scammers use to accurately target victims directly? Do we see specific targeting of victims in one population versus another? So I'd like your insights on this.
The internet has made people the commodity that's for sale. And really, over the last 20 years, marketing mechanisms have gotten so sophisticated that everything that you do online is recorded and can be used to specifically target you based on where you are, what your interests are, and the content that you see online is the content that you are most likely to engage with. It's the difference between targeting a person over 60 in Texas and targeting a person over 60 who likes quilting, who recently bought fabric at the Joanne fabric store. It's very specific to your interests, which also means that you're much more likely to engage with the content.
And I think just one point that Ken made earlier, and I know you said this to me in the past, the obituary pages. That's also very, very specific targeting, right?
It is, yes. We see seniors targeted on the obituary pages across the nation, which is really sad to think about. You're likely in the midst of grief when you're looking at that kind of content, but that also plays into the psychology aspect of scammers because they're going to leverage your grief to hijack your brain in that moment. And that is exactly what they do. The marketing means that have been created and adopted over the last 20 years are also adopted by bad actors, and they use those same marketing tactics to find their next victim. Bad actors use psychology tactics to hijack your brain. They leverage things like biases. So authority bias, you're more likely to trust someone in a position of authority, such as law enforcement, state government, IRS, or even your boss. Confirmation bias, this can even include your belief that you actually can get rich quickly. That is a confirmation bias that we have, and it is why things like investment scams work so well. And social proof. So that really plays into the tech support. You trust Microsoft to be there for you to protect your computer, and bad actors use Microsoft's name and brand to build that social proof trust in what they are selling to you. They use fear, urgency, scarcity. Fear is a really big one in the tech support world. You have alarms blaring, you have your computer is locked down and taken over. And so that creates this adrenaline or release of chemicals in your body that short circuits your ability to think rationally and see your way through what is a scam. And they know information about you. Ken mentioned this with his mom very specifically. What your name is, where you bank at. If you think about every piece of content that you've ever posted on social media, every purchase that you've made, every app that you've downloaded, those things are all out there and are used for targeting and retargeting. And they're also used by bad actors to find you and make you a victim without knowing that that's what's happening. Tech support scams are underreported. We see this in our data every day. The IC3 data from the FBI that Ken just showed shows how big the problem is that's reported, but the actual volume of tech support scams is probably 50x what's actually reported. And that's because so many people don't know that they're the victim of a tech support scam. And bad actors go far lengths to make sure that that's the case. In fact, when I was at Microsoft, we used to call seniors who we saw paying for advertising with their credit card, only to find out they thought they were paying for tech support by Microsoft, and we were charging them back for ad content to find more victims, but the charge came from Microsoft. So there was a legitimacy in this really sophisticated scheme that also tied into the ad market of how they attract more victims.
Wow. And one piece here is really, I think we heard about a few ways that scammers use to reach out to victims. But I wanted to ask you, Kit, maybe you can share with us, what are common ways? I think you're being approached by scammers all day. You probably have honeypot methods as well. So first of all, what are common ways beyond what we heard, the pop-ups and the targets? And maybe you can get more technical on how it happens. And also, what do they do to gain trust? We heard from Ken one example with the, he broke it down very nicely with the phone number being spoofed and the information that they had. What are other ways that they use to gain trust? And what are some tactics that they use to reach out?
Sure. I do think it's important to echo some of what Ken and Sarah said too. And for those of you that don't know me, I think I've done something like 20, maybe 30,000 phone calls over the past 8 years. I essentially pretended to be a victim and research these scams. And I would say predominantly, overwhelmingly, the fake virus pop-up when we're talking about tech support scams is like the number one way that they are approaching their victims or target victims. I can talk about a couple other ways they do it as well, but I think it's worth saying from the Seraph Secure side, we work with a lot of service providers or mom and pop computer repair shops, and they say overwhelmingly the number one reason that someone's coming into the computer shop when they get scammed is they saw the virus pop up. They saw something on their computer that said there was a virus or Microsoft needed to contact them. A couple other ways that maybe aren't as familiar, and we can get into some of the details. They will send text messages, and perhaps they'll say, this is Amazon, and there was a purchase on your Amazon account for a treadmill or just some purchase that you're not expecting. And when you answer if you call that number, it's not actually Amazon. They will tell you that someone has hacked your Amazon account, and then they'll do the traditional kind of tech support scam like Ken just laid out. They'll tell you that there were some kind of hackers or someone has infected your network, and that's their excuse as to why they need to connect your computer with that remote connection software that Ken was referring to. So text messages are one way. Email is another really big way. I think a lot of people are familiar with what I call the refund scam. It's essentially an email that's from Geek Squad or some brand that you trust, Microsoft, Amazon, PayPal, and it will say that you're being charged $500 to renew your Norton, $500 to buy Bitcoin, something that you might not be expecting. And when you call this 1-800 number, you're greeted by a very nice individual that's going to pretend to be that brand and then guide you through this same tactic that we've been talking about.
And just to say that 1-800 number is typically the biggest font in that email.
Yes.
It's like flashing, call this number. So, but just to go back to Sarah's earlier comments, that's a very big part of the psychology, right? The fonts so that's really interesting. A lot of stories bring to essentially, so they found different ways. And I think that's a very, very common pattern. You see that in romance scams. You see that in cryptocurrency investment scams. There's the one story that works really well, but people are starting with the education to get familiar with that story. They shift to a different story, but execute the same tactics. So what are some ways they gain trust after the initial? So you call them back, and then you're probably acting suspicious sometimes. So how do they gain trust beyond what Ken shared with us earlier?
Yeah, and if I could just add one other thing about the way that they're contacting us. So they are exploiting ad networks still. They're all over Facebook, Google, Bing, pretty much any advertising platform you can think of. Scammers are still finding ways to exploit it. So you might be searching for something legitimate, click an ad, and then you see this virus pop up. It's been plaguing Facebook actually, where up at the top right, they run ads that look like notification bells. And when you click the notification bell, it takes you to a virus pop-up, which is part of how they gain trust, right? You're on Facebook, you see the notification bell, you click the link because you think you have a notification, and then you see a virus pop up, and you see Microsoft on it, you call the number. I think it's worth just drilling that in over and over. To me, the second that you call that 1-800 number, 50% of the scam is over, perhaps more, because you believe that you are talking to Microsoft. You believe that you're talking to Geek Squad or whoever it is. So they kind of hijack that brand that you trust. They've been using DocuSign and PayPal and QuickBooks invoices recently. So you actually get an invoice from QuickBooks, but in the message it says to call this, Microsoft 1-800 number. And again, it's just a way that they exploit your brand trust because you see QuickBooks and you go, oh, this must be a legitimate invoice.
Yeah. Yes, I got the DocuSign one too, and I did click the link, and then I'm like, oh, did I just download remote access to on myself? But yeah, it's definitely very tricky, and they change the methods all the time. And we'll hear more from Sarah later about the ad networks and what we can do about it. But I wanted to now switch a little bit from our first part, which is the initial contact, how do they reach out, to how do they gain access and what happens at that point in time. So I wanted to invite Antoine to join us. And we'll start with you in this section. So Antoine, you come from TeamViewer, and TeamViewer, among some other remote access tools, has been incredible in driving collaboration and help us solve problems and real tech support that is very helpful. But unfortunately, it's very dangerous in the wrong hands, and criminals have abused these platforms. So I wanted to ask you what you've seen, and I'm sure as a company, all of these tools that are enabling great stuff are concerned about this abuse. So what have you seen, and what is TeamViewer doing to prevent this type of abuse?
Definitely. Actually, this is a very good question, because essentially TeamViewer comes a bit later at the scam scenario, so to say, as we already discussed, and I can only agree to this. And I think given the way that TeamViewer is designed, it's following a freemium model. So everyone can download it, everyone can use it and hop on a connection within a few seconds. And of course, from a legitimate perspective, that's great. You can connect to everything. You can connect from a tablet to a coffee machine even. But again, having this ease of use and allowing people to just download the software, give someone their ID, and voila, you're immediately on that machine. That is actually a double-edged sword. And I think our main responsibility is basically to break the social engineering while the TeamViewer connection is starting, or ideally, of course, before the TeamViewer connection has started. And I think we have worked quite a lot in the last 5 or 6 years on actually redesigning the product, because we noticed that a lot of the features which used to be available for free users as well would tend to be abused. Just to give maybe 2 examples of it, we used to allow people to essentially lock the remote input on the other side of the machine. And that basically means, imagine somebody's connecting to your machine, and with a single click of a button, you no longer have control over your mouse and keyboard. Combining that with another feature, which would be turning the screen black on the other side. Originally intended for working from home, actually works quite well, right? If I connect from here to my office, I don't need anyone to see what I'm working on, of course. But we would see that scammers would actually find very clever ways to use the software to actually facilitate their scam and make it even more appealing to them. And that's why we've developed, we can see it later also in the slides, but we have an approach which focuses on 5 different stages. From one perspective, we actually try to make it not too hard for people to use the software, but also not to make it too easy. Older TeamViewer versions would basically require you to only download the software, know the ID and password, and you can connect. You don't need to have an account. You don't have to prove your digital identity. You don't have to do anything. Now, Combining this with the fact that you can also choose an arbitrary display name and you can call yourself tech support or Microsoft tech support or whichever it is, it can be really everything. It can be your local water supply company, right? Really. That makes it even easier to convince the victim in that case. Because anyway, the victim is already, as Kit said, 50% in it because they already clicked on that ad, they already called that number. Now seeing that a connection comes from someone who can very easily impersonate themselves as a legitimate company facilitates and solidifies the scam. And from that perspective, gaining access to someone's machine, especially nowadays when everything is digital, and fortunately and unfortunately, everyone has gotten used to doing everything digitally. Payments, invoices, name it. This then also makes it easier for people to believe that they're right now doing something completely normal. That somebody is right now browsing through my online banking is completely normal. That's just how it is because they claim so. And what we decided to do is essentially since already a few years, when you download TeamViewer, to establish a connection, you need to create an account. Creating an account requires a legitimate email address because that account needs to be validated. You cannot simply create an account with Antoine@amazon.com, right? That's not possible. Once you do this, anyway, it already requires some additional resources from the scammers, which waste their time, and wasted scammers' time is less victims, which is also always great. But going deeper into how we design the product, we design it in a way where we have fraud and scam prevention in mind. When somebody, and this we will see, maybe we can also go to the slides to have a look at those. Whenever now somebody jumps into a connection, they would get a warning. They would get a warning which will display basically the license status of that person who is connecting to you, because it's not very logical that Microsoft, who is just coming to support you, would use a free account. It's also not very logical that they would use an email, which is, Microsoft employee using a Gmail domain. It's also not very likely, right? Having additional inputs such as country, such as location, these are all things that we actually show to the user before the connection even starts. Because once they have already believed the scam, they already, as I think we already mentioned it, they start thinking it in a different way. But if we take a second and pause the connection and have the user look at this information, already has a very high likelihood that that would break the social engineering and the user will have now second guesses about that connection. Moreover, the scammer in that case would have to now additionally convince and answer questions that the user might have. Maybe the user will start asking, well, why are you coming from this country and why you're not coming from that country, right? Why do you have a free account? Aren't you a company? This already ensures that, as I said, the social engineering can be broken, but additionally, we also have some specific targeted measures which are done by the trust and safety team, such as actually monitoring different behaviors. If somebody is just creating accounts and connecting to countries which are 4,000 kilometers away from him, that's most likely not somebody helping their family, which is what TeamViewer Free, let's say, or at least one of the things which it is intended for. Going deeper in some specific countries where it is very difficult to obtain a phone number, we have implemented SMS verification. So you would not really risk to verify your phone number with an account which you would then use to scam. And of course, I think we already mentioned this, that at the end of the day, after we go through these measures, we need to also close the loop and allow the user easy way to actually report this connection. We, of course, can see the patterns, but if the customers, be it a customer that or a user reports the scam via the tool, or they go to the police, we have all these feedback loops basically, which come back to us and we learn from it, and then we further improve the measures. I think in the next slide, we can also see this, which is basically how these pop-ups might look like. And we can see on the left, we would already ask the user if this is a free connection. Do you expect this connection? Are you expecting that somebody is now about to connect to you? Can you review this information? And only after you have reviewed it, and you need to click that you have reviewed it, that already wastes time, of course, during the scam, but also ensures that people go through it. And additionally, of course, once they are in the session, there needs to be an easy way to exit the session and stop the scam. That's why we also implemented a very easy button to just immediately end the session. And after you end the session, you, of course, have the option to provide feedback on what actually happened. I think these are just some of the examples. Of course, scam or impersonation is not really the only or the silver bullet when it comes to scams. We are, of course, talking about one of their examples. But our goal is basically to prevent being a very efficient tool that scammers can use. And I think at this point, looking as well at the numbers, we have definitely improved. But again, it's a continuous process. We learn, we adapt, and we adapt the product. But I think there were, of course, a lot of hard lessons that we learned as a company,
Yeah.
and we made sure to redesign things.
Thank you so much, Antoine. I wanted to say that while you were speaking, the chat exploded. So now I'll switch to Kitboga, but I recommend that you read the chat because you might want to answer some of the questions that were asked there. Thanks everyone for being so active on the chat, and we'll definitely address some of the comments within our conversation, and some we'll address later. But definitely keep chatting there and responding to each other. So now that someone gained access, if they're successful in this, what do they typically do, Kit? Can you walk us through a common kind of step-by-step scenario?
Yeah, sure. Interestingly, one of the first things that they will do is install more remote access tools. So whether they use TeamViewer, AnyDesk, there's dozens of them. One of the first things that they do is install more because they want to get their hooks in as deep as possible. And let's say they installed TeamViewer first, and later Antoine and his team ban their TeamViewer account. They want to make sure that they can gain access to the victim another way. I suppose it's important to bring this up in case someone watching doesn't understand that these tools are often persistent. Another way to say this is when you set up a remote connection software, even when you hang up the phone on the scammer, even when you restart your computer, the scammer can reconnect to your computer again the next morning or at any time. In some cases, some of the worst ones can connect the second that you boot up your computer. You haven't even logged into your computer yet, and the scammer is there watching everything you're doing. So yeah, one of the first things to do is set up more remote access. The other thing that they typically do in the timeline of the tech support scam is they'll ask you to log into important things like your email. Perhaps they'll say, we need to check your email for hackers. We need to check your bank for hackers, things like this. And that's when they hide your screen, like Antoine said. I'll talk about what they do when they hide your screen in a second, but I do want to say really quickly, I've seen way less scammers using TeamViewer since you guys made that change. And so hopefully other remote connection software companies follow suit, because when they can hide your screen to a victim, they just think their computer is off, or some remote tools will even allow them to write a message that says something like your computer is updating. So you think that your computer is updating. Meanwhile, the scammer has full access to your computer. They can move the mouse. They can look at your webcam. At this point, they have, if you're on your email, they have access to perhaps your two-factor authentication. So imagine now the scammer is on your bank and they add a new Zelle recipient, or they add a new wire transfer recipient, and an email confirmation shows up saying, are you sure you want to add this bank account? And they can just click yes, and you don't even see this because your computer screen is hidden. I've seen them start going, at this point, it becomes a crime of opportunity, and I've watched them try to go to Kraken and Coinbase and crypto websites to see if you have an account. Charles Schwab, Fidelity, right? On Chrome and modern web browsers, you save your passwords, and you can just click a little button to view your password. And since you're already authenticated and it's your computer, the browser will just show your password. So at this point, it just gets really bad because the scammers now have their kind of hooks into your life. So I've worked with law enforcement, and we've seen situations where someone has been scammed continuously for years. We had one victim in particular who had been scammed for 7 years, and it all stemmed back to her first installing a remote connection tool because she thought someone was helping fix her printer. And then for years, they would spy on her and see everything that she was doing. So at one point when she went to ic3.gov and filled out a report to say, I have been scammed, the scammers were watching. And then they called and said, hi, I'm from ic3.gov. We're here to help you get your money back, right? So I think that's the elephant in the room for me, or something that I think we really need to drive home is the general public does not realize how the scammers utilize this. They do not realize that once it's installed, it stays installed and it stays on the computer. And I think Ken brought this up, but FBI, FTC, bank accounts, they all have varying opinions about what you're supposed to do after you get scammed. And none of them say to remove these remote connections or pay attention to them.
Or protect your Google passwords with biometric authentication.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And then finally, maybe just one more question very quick, and then we'll talk about fighting back. Then I want to make sure we have enough time there. So how do they cash out? Let's say they convinced someone to pay them, and then they paid too much money, and now they need to pay them back. Like all these methods of cash out. Can you walk us quickly through a few there?
Yeah, you're asking me. So commonly, I think Ken even alluded to this, 10 years ago, or I started about 8-9 years ago, it was gift cards. They wanted $500. They wanted a quick credit card payment. And now they've become very aggressive towards stealing your life savings. I mean, I've had over and over again, once the scammer's on your computer, they see your bank account and see how much money they have. Now it's like, let's do everything we can to manipulate you to liquidate everything you have. If they start to ask questions like, do you have a 401k? Do you have a retirement? And they'll call you and pretend to be Fidelity and say that your 401k has been compromised and they're going to help you do that. So primarily right now, though, if you're speaking in generalities, they're predominantly moving money through crypto right now. I think it's just a little bit quicker and easier for them. They still do a lot of wire transfers as well. Like gift cards just aren't as popular, and I think it's particularly because of the dollar amount. Google used to be able to buy a $500 or even $1,000 gift card, and now I think the most I ever see in person is like $50. And if a scammer is trying to steal $20,000 from you, you're not going to go to the store and buy a bunch of $50 gift cards. So wire transfers, Bitcoin ATMs. I hope that answers your question.
No, thank you. Okay, so let's switch gears to talk about what we can do about this as an industry. Again, the chat is very vibrant, and I really thank everyone for your thoughts and ideas and the conversation. So I wanted to start with you, Leyla, and ask, what can consumer, because this is, there's a point where the money goes out the bank, and that's where banks can put controls in. But a lot before that, what can consumer cybersecurity products do, and what role can they play in preventing tech support scams broadly? And then I would love to hear more about specifically what you're doing at Gen.
Yeah, for sure. So you remember this nice slide we started the conversation with. Ken showed the phases of the attack, and he also talked about different types of opportunities we could have to be able to detect those things. And we talked about how, for initially, the infection vector, how do they reach out? Like, okay, we talk about malicious pop-ups. Sarah mentioned about malicious advertisements. If you are a consumer cyber safety company, you will be able to at least be able to filter out a big percentage of those cases, right? So before the people see the pop-ups, you will detect them. Yeah, of course, it was always a cat and mouse game, and they will register new domains and so on. But you will still make their lives harder, which is a good thing already, right? And then we talked about emails, SMSs, and so on. So right now, what we are seeing as a global consumer security company with over 400 million customers is that the scam ecosystem is so much bigger than all the cybercrime that we knew of over the last 20 years. So in the past, while people would get maybe on average 1 or 2 malware per year, now they would get 2 SMSs per week, 2 emails per week, and a lot of calls. And of course, these are very interconnected, right? Like those Indian call centers are also connected with the Eastern Asian mafia. So they will, or like a breach databases, they will get some data breach. They will gonna call you. And it happened to us. Like here, I live in France, and one of the companies were breached, and all of a sudden we get a call and we know it's a scammer, right? Even if we know it's a scammer, it's so bothering. It feels like there is this guy constantly knocking at your door, trying to open the door. The door is secure, but that guy is always there, right? Even like we talked about the fact that education is so important and people could do so much more. But at the same time, even if you know it's such a bothering, stressful event, clearly filtering them out is so important. I think for the first time in our, like my, at least professional life, I feel the need of having an anti-scam solution, which will be filtering things for me. So I will only go and check those that are very, very sophisticated. So there are a lot of things you can do. You can filter out things in the delivery channels. Of course, we talked about what, for example, TeamViewer could do or any other remote access tools. But the issue that we have, yes, we will be able to detect those, but now with the power of AI, it will be not so difficult for them to just implement a version of them that they can just install and download to your computer. So you won't have any problem detecting. So we'll have to have something that is constantly checking if what you're downloading is legitimate, right? So there is like at the end of the day, we have a lot of responsibilities here as a cybersecurity company. And what we are doing, again, we talked about, so we do have solutions that will be protecting our customers, but we're really seeing a huge increase, in particular on tech support scams, with likely the impact of AI, like the URLs and domains that we knew that they were kind of malicious advertisements and tech support landing pages that we knew a year ago they were not used, and all of a sudden this quarter we saw 400 times more. All of a sudden, all those things start being active because they're able to scale their attacks so much more. So we'll see many, many different things. And definitely one thing that we are really proud of as a company is that we do have some premium solutions as well, but we also have premium solution because our goal is really to try to help people out there and democratize the anti-scam protection. So we have tools that are made available for people that cannot afford this, because you should be able to at least have a basic security and safety out there if you want to be able to freely do your digital interactions.
Thank you so much, Leyla. So Antoine, I wanted to ask, just given what we heard earlier from Kit, with so many remote access tools are installed to ensure persistence. So I wanted to ask you, is there a need for stronger industry standards or collaboration between remote access vendors? And can you share your thoughts? I think you had some thoughts. Some things are really going on already, so I'd love to hear.
Of course. That's actually something that we already have been thinking quite a lot and already collaborating with other organizations on. Maybe one thing which I personally at least believe really needs to happen is something we already have on mobile. Currently, if somebody, at least also for the TeamViewer app, if you have somebody connected to you on the TeamViewer app and you open an online banking or any other banking app or app which is sensitive, such as like crypto exchanges and stuff like that, we would turn the screen black. That means that we basically stop the screen sharing at that moment. That technology is also called Flag Secure. It's available for Android, it's available for iOS, but unfortunately we don't have something similar on browsers. Currently, if I connect to a machine and the browser is opened, I see everything, and there's not an easy way for the remote access software to actually know what is opened and prevent the screen sharing from being displayed. We do have a solution in-house, which we already work with a few partners, which is called our so-called risk scoring API, which essentially allows banks to ask TeamViewer and send a call directly to the TeamViewer client and basically ask it if there is currently a TeamViewer session going on, and if yes, provide a risk score. In that case, basically TeamViewer will respond to the banking page that currently there is a TeamViewer session going on. It's, let's say, considered above average risk. In that case, the banking app can at that moment, and this happens in real time, right? It takes, I think it was actually around 50 milliseconds to get the response. And from that point on, the banking website can maybe reject the transaction, log out the user, or maybe even show a pop-up. But having something which is, as I think Leyla already mentioned, this is just then TeamViewer. right? We can tell the bank that there is a TV running and maybe there is a fraudulent connection going on. But what about the other software? What about all the other tools that scammers might use? Additionally, we have also seen how there are already existing very innocent looking tools with maybe even Microsoft would offer, such as the event viewer, the task manager. You can do various commands in command prompt, which just look scary to a regular user. All of these things, if they are also designed with security in mind, that could definitely help also reduce the amount of tools that scammers have at their disposal. But as I said, most importantly, having a unified way for all of these tools to communicate with each other and basically act together against the scams, that would really benefit. And that's what I really think we should be doing. We are already doing it, of course, with organizations such as GASA, such as Stop Scam UK. But again, there is really more need to actually collaborate with all the other parts of the scammer's journey, so to say, or the scammer's toolset. We're talking about like emails, account creation, what kind of emails are allowed to be created, how often can you create emails, virtual machines. It's really at this point a different game. I think scammers can really scale up their attacks. They can use virtual machines to have multiple devices from which they connect to. They can use AI to generate a lot of content, which they can use also for phishing attacks. So I think we all need to work together and actually try to implement the right tools and design the products with the right mindset, so that we really, at the end of the day, make it as hard as possible or waste as much as possible time for scammers at a point where it's no longer worth it for them to do this.
Yeah, and thank you. Speaking of blocking remote access connections, a lot of people in the chat are like dying to hear about Seraph Secure. So that leads me to my next question, Kit. If you can share what you're doing with Seraph Secure to really stop the remote access, unwanted remote access activity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, and thanks. I can't see the chat, but thank you guys. I mean, we built like
you do have groupies in the chat. I'll just say that.
Okay. The reason we built it, it was from and inspired from similar stories about tech support scams. Every day we were getting emails from people in the community where someone had been a victim to these scams, and there was no solution out there for someone to quickly clean their computer, make sure that no scammers were on there, and then protect them in the future. And similar to what Leyla said, we believe really strongly that this should just be free. Like it's free software. It will remove all of the remote connections from someone's computer, and it will prevent them from being installed in the future as well. So for like my parents, I don't want them to ever have some scammer accessing their computer. It will just block them, and they'll get a warning about what's happening. So yeah, we're really proud of that. We've expanded quite a bit since then, but particularly we're just getting lots of messages from the people using it that have prevented tech support scams. So it's been great.
Thank you so much. So we talked a lot about the remote access tools and how to stop and identify that activity. But really, let's go back to the ads and to the infection. So Sarah, I wanted to ask you, what can organizations who use marketing tactics? So I think in the chat it exploded too, like the Facebook example that you gave, Kit, I think was very eye-opening, how they leverage the ability to impersonate is wrong, but use the notifications to look like it's coming from the platform itself and not as an ad. So Sarah, what can organizations do to ensure that they avoid abuse by criminals? If I want to have ads on my site or I'm a legitimate service, how can we put controls in place to prevent our consumers, our target audience, from getting all these malicious ads?
Thanks. So I did see a question in the chat about, can't tech companies just detect and block these ads from serving? And having worked for Microsoft advertising for 10 years and dedicated my life to blocking these ads, I can tell you it's just not that simple. Because of the hyper targeting mechanisms of the internet, it's really difficult from inside the bounds of a company to see the harms that are serving. Cloaking is a tactic where bad actors hide their scam content from investigators in cybersecurity, and it can even include blocking specific company IP addresses so that they can't see the harmful content from inside. So the answer is that there are third-party companies like the Media Trust that uses AI to emulate victims with synthetic personas across many geographies. So, for example, the Media Trust has over 100,000 unique personas running across 121 countries. And we're using these synthetic personas to be the victim and be attacked, which allows us to find the harmful content, see through the emerging tactics, and block the harmful content before it serves, or if we're employed on a website, all the way up to the time of serving when the website renders. So marketing technology companies and website owners need to leverage these kind of third parties to defeat cloaking and to see the targeted scams. If you aren't the victim, you rarely see the scam. You see what we call the safe page, which looks completely benign. And if you are the victim, you get sent to the tech support scam. And for companies who may want to understand how they're being attacked or how their employees are being attacked, Proxyware is a device that installs at your corporate location, senior center, school, or whatever other location, and can see the targeted content that is specific to your company. So as an example, we're installed in a national realtor brand's offices, and the most commonly targeted websites for this company is realtor.com and zillow.com, two websites that, as hard as they would try in the realty industry, they could never prevent going to those sites on a daily basis. And so that's where the scams are being targeted at them. And so Proxyware can be a great addition to a company's security stack as well, to very specifically understand how your employees or your senior citizens or your students are being targeted, and then reverse engineer that and protect them and take that content off the internet.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that point of it's not so easy because of the targeting, because they use different parameters to get to the victims versus the companies checking. But still, I think we definitely need to do more, and we need to set policy around that that is, across the industry. So we talked about the anatomy of a scam, how it works, the different steps. We also talked about a few solutions and controls, and there is a lot more to do. And just like Antoine said, this is an arms race. We'll have a solution. They'll think about something else, and we'll continue this path. And we opened with you, Ken. I wanted to wrap up with you, and I wanted to ask you, what are some policy changes that you're advocating for with Stop Scams Alliance? And how can organizations help reduce tech support scammed operation working together?
Yeah, so Sarah talked about some of the difficulties of blocking, and that's something that we should try to do, of course, but it's the bad stuff's always going to get by. So one of the things that Stop Scams Alliance focuses on quite a bit is authentication technologies, so that you can more reliably do commerce with someone and trust who's on the other end. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. There's now 17 countries in the world that require authentication of financial ads. So if a financial ad is being placed, you can trust it because it's on a list that's of only regulated companies can place financial ads. Another example is there's now 19 countries in the world where if an international call is coming into their country and it's spoofing or pretending to be a domestic call, the telcos block it. So in other words, there's now 19 countries in the world where their citizens know when they're getting a foreign phone call. But that capability is not available in the US, so that's why people think they're dealing with somebody from the US. They're really talking to somebody in a foreign country, but they have no way of knowing that. The point is that there are technologies available to authenticate across the board in advertising space, in the phone space, in email, in websites, so that we can do commerce with each other more reliably. One other point that I would make is we've all talked about probably a $10 billion plus problem in the United States that's affecting hundreds of thousands of people. If that were true for any company in the United States, the White House's hair would be on fire and we would have task forces to get everybody together to stop it. In fact, we do that with ransomware. But here we have a crime that is far more costly than ransomware. And we don't have the organization in place, either at the White House, or I'm glad to hear Antoine say that there's some movements to get the remote access software companies talking, but this needs to be broader. We need to involve the operating systems. We need to have the browsers. We need to have the antivirus. We need to have the remote access software, and we need to have the telephone companies all cooperate. And if we did so, I have no doubt that we could squash this.
Thank you so much, Ken. And we'll all continue to work together to see that through and to drive that change. So Leyla, Sarah, Antoine, Kit, and Ken, thank you so much for joining today. I wanted to thank the audience. We had hundreds of people joining, so thank you so much for being here with us and for allowing us to go 2 minutes over. And we will continue down the line with these Anatomy of a Scam webinars. And we'd love to hear your feedback. And again, reminding you of our conference, December 3 and 4, in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much.